The laughter echoed through the busy steakhouse as the group of businessmen pointed at the young waitress's tattoo. They thought it was just another trendy design, something to mock during their expensive dinner. The blonde woman in the simple black uniform said nothing, her green eyes staying calm as they joke about fake military wannabes. They had no idea the tattoo was a memorial. They had no idea the names inked on her skin belonged to fallen Navy SEALs. And they had no idea that the restaurant owner watching from the kitchen was a SEAL commander who recognized every single name on her arm. Before we continue with this powerful story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share these important stories about our military heroes and the people who honor them. The perfect evening, until it was Sarah Mitchell moved through Marino's Steakhouse with the practice efficiency of someone who had been waiting tables for 3 years. At 22 years old, she had perfected the art of being invisible, smiling politely, refilling drinks before they were empty, and never drawing attention to herself. The restaurant was celebrating its 15th anniversary, and the dining room buzzed with the energy of satisfied customers enjoying perfectly grilled steaks and expensive wine. The exposed brick walls were decorated with soft Edison bulbs that cast a warm glow over the white tablecloths. Jazz music played softly from hidden speakers, just loud enough to create ambience without drowning out conversation. It was the kind of place where proposals happened, where business deals were sealed over whiskey, where families celebrated graduations and promotions. Sarah loved working here. The owner, a quiet man named James Harrison who rarely left the kitchen, paid well and treated his staff with unusual respect. He never yelled, never cut corners, and always made sure his employees ate a proper meal before their shifts. There was something about him, a stillness, a way of moving with deliberate precision, that made people naturally respect him, even though most knew nothing about his past. Tonight, Sarah wore her standard uniform, black slacks, a crisp white button-down shirt, and a black apron tied around her waist. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She looked professional, unremarkable, exactly how she wanted to look. But the heat was unbearable. The restaurant's aging air conditioning system had chosen the busiest night of the year to malfunction, and the temperature in the dining room hovered somewhere around 85 degrees. The kitchen staff were working in conditions that felt like a sauna, and even the front of house was suffering. Sarah had started her shift with long sleeves, as she always did. But by 7 p.m., with sweat trickling down her back and her shirt clinging uncomfortably to her skin, she made a decision she rarely made. She rolled up her sleeves. The tattoo on her left forearm became visible for the first time that evening. Black ink covered her skin from wrist to elbow, not a decorative design or a trendy pattern, but something far more deliberate. Names. 6 names, each written in block letters with military precision. Beneath each name was a date, and woven into the names were coordinates, map references, and a small phrase in Latin. Fortes fortuna devat. Fortune favors the brave. They arrived at 7:30 p.m., for men in expensive suits who carried themselves with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. They were corporate executives from a tech company in the city, in town for a conference, already 3 drinks deep from the hotel bar, before they'd even arrived at Marino as the host seated them at table 12, a prime spot near the window with a view of the city lights. Sarah was assigned to their section, and she approached with her standard greeting and a professional smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Marino's. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The leader of the group, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a Rolex that cost more than Sarah's car, barely looked at her. "Scotch. Top shelf. Don't cheap out." His companions ordered similar drinks, their voices loud and already slurring slightly. Sarah nodded, taking mental notes without writing anything down, another skill she perfected over the years. As she turned to leave, one of them noticed her tattoo. "Hey, hold up." The youngest of the group, probably early 30s with styled hair and designer glasses, pointed at her forearm. "What's that supposed to be?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to cover the tattoo, but it was too late. The attention of all 4 men was now focused on her arm. "Is that like a military thing?" Another one asked, his tone making it clear he found the concept amusing. "It's personal," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest. "Personal?" The leader laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the ambient jazz music. Sweetheart, if you're going to wear on your sleeve, literally, it's not that personal anymore. His friends found this hilarious, their laughter drawing glances from nearby tables. Sarah felt her face flush, but she maintained her composure. I'll go get your drinks. Wait. The man with the designer glasses leaned forward, squinting at her tattoo. Those are names. And dates. What is this? Some kind of wannabe military tribute. You watch too many war movies. Let me guess, the leader interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. You've got a boyfriend in the military, and you thought this would be romantic? Or are you one of those military groupies who hangs around bases? The fourth man, who had been quiet until now, joined in. My money's on fake patriot. Probably never even met a real soldier. Just thought the tattoo looked edgy. Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained calm. Gentlemen, I'll be right back with your drinks. She turned and walked away with as much dignity as she could muster, ignoring the continued laughter behind her. But as she approached the bar to place their order, she didn't notice the figure standing in the kitchen doorway, his eyes locked on her forearm, his entire body gone rigid. The commander who remembered everything James Harrison had been in the kitchen all evening, overseeing the anniversary special menu, and making sure every dish that left his kitchen was perfect. At 52 years old, with gray hair and weathered features, he looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a former chef who had opened a successful restaurant after years of working in high-end establishments. What his staff didn't know was that James Harrison had never been a professional chef. He'd learned to cook in naval special warfare training, refined his skills in forward operating bases across 3 continents, and only opened Marino's Steakhouse after retiring from 28 years as a Navy SEAL, the last 12. As a commander, his career was classified, his missions were redacted, the medals he'd earned were locked in a safe deposit box he never visited. When people asked about his past, he gave vague answers about government work and changed the subject. He'd seen too much, lost too many brothers, carried too many flag-draped coffins. The restaurant was his escape, his attempt at a normal life after decades of living in the shadows. But when Sarah Mitchell rolled up her sleeves and walked past the kitchen door, James Harrison's carefully constructed, peaceful existence shattered like glass. He saw the tattoo. He saw the names of Marcus Chun, March 15th, 2019 David Hawk Rawlings, March 15th, 2019 Tyler Brooks, March 15th, 2019 Anthony DeLuca, March 15th, 2019 James Spider Nakamura, March 15th, 2019 Robert Mack McDonald, 03.15.2019 March 15th, 2019. Kabul, Afghanistan. A date burned into Harrison's memory with the intensity of a branding iron. He knew those names. He knew those men. He had trained with them, fought beside them, and held some of them as they died. They were part of SEAL Team 7, a unit he commanded for 3 years before being promoted to a joint task force position. And beneath the names, he saw the coordinates. 34.555 3 degrees north, 69.2075 degrees east. The exact location of the collapsed building, the rescue mission, the civilian casualties. The after-action report that had taken him 3 weeks to write because he couldn't type through the shaking in his hands. James's mind raced. Why did this young waitress have the names of his fallen teammates tattooed on her arm? How did she know them? Was she related to one of them? The possibilities flooded his thoughts. But one thing was absolutely certain. Those names were not public knowledge. The mission details were classified. The only people who knew the full story were the SEALs who had been there and the civilians they had rescued. His head snapped up. The civilians they had rescued. James moved to the kitchen window that looked out onto the dining room. He watched Sarah approach the bar, her shoulders held with unnatural tension. He saw her hands shaking slightly as she placed the drink order. He saw the way she unconsciously covered her tattoo with her right hand. And then he heard the laughter from table 12, the mockery escalate. Sarah returned to table 12 with their drinks, setting them down with practiced efficiency. She hoped they would drop the subject of her tattoo, that their attention would shift to their food and conversation. But she wasn't that lucky. So we've been discussing your little artwork, the leader said, taking a sip of his scotch and grimacing. And we've decided you're full of it. Sarah's jaw tightened. but she forced a polite smile. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" No, we want to hear the story." The man with designer glasses pulled out his phone, opening the camera app. "Come on, tell us the truth. Where'd you really get that tattoo?" "Some sketchy shop in the bad part town. This is going on Instagram." Another one chimed in. "My followers are going to love this. Fake military tribute spotted in the wild." Other customers were starting to notice the commotion. An elderly couple at the next table looked uncomfortable. A family with 2 teenagers shifted awkwardly, the parents exchanging concerned glances. But no one intervened. Sarah's professional mask began to crack. "Sir, I prefer not to be photographed. Please put your phone away." "Oh, she doesn't want to be photographed." The leader's voice dripped with mock sympathy. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Afraid someone who actually knows the military will call you out for stolen valor." The phrase "stolen valor" hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her face went pale, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. These men had no idea what they were saying. No idea what those names meant. No idea what she'd lost. "Those names," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "belong to heroes who died saving my life." The table erupted in laughter again, even louder this time. "Oh, this just keeps getting better." Designer glasses wheezed. "SEALs save your life? What? Did they rescue you from a bad Tinder date?" "Let me guess," the leader interrupted. "You were trapped in enemy territory or some other made-up nonsense you saw in a movie." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I need to check on my other tables." As she turned to leave, the leader reached out and grabbed her wrist, the one with the tattoo. His grip was firm, aggressive, designed to assert dominance. "We're not done talking to you, honey." That's when the atmosphere in the restaurant changed completely. The commander steps forward. "Remove your hand from my employee. Now." The voice came from behind the businessmen, calm but carrying an unmistakable tone of command. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the restaurant like a blade through silk. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. James Harrison stood 3 feet behind table 12, his chef's coat still on, his hands relaxed at his sides. He wasn't a particularly large man, 5 feet 10 inches, maybe 180 pounds. But there was something about the way he carried himself that made people instinctively move out his way. The leader released Sarah's wrist and turned his chair, ready to confront this interruption with the same arrogance he'd shown the waitress. But when his eyes met James Harrison's gaze, something in his bravado faltered. Harrison's eyes were cold, analytical, the eyes of someone who had looked at human beings through rifle scopes and made life-or-death decisions in fractions of seconds. "Who the hell are you?" the leader asked, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I'm the owner of this establishment, and you're about 30 seconds away from being escorted out by police." "Are you kidding?" Designer glasses stood up, his phone still recording. "We're paying customers. We can say whatever we want." Harrison's expression didn't change. "You assaulted my employee by grabbing her wrist. You harassed her about a tattoo that's none of your business. And you're disrupting my restaurant. So no, you can't say whatever you want." "Look, man," the leader tried a different approach, switching to a patronizing tone. "We're just having some fun with your waitress here. She's got this fake military tattoo, and we're calling her out on it. You should be thanking us for exposing stolen valor in your own restaurant." Harrison took 1 step closer to the table. Just 1 step. But the movement made all 4 men unconsciously lean back in their chairs. "Stolen valor," Harrison repeated, his voice even quieter now. "You think you know what that phrase means?" "Yeah, it means pretending to be military when you're not," one of them answered defensively. Harrison looked at Sarah, who stood frozen beside the table, her hand still rubbing her wrist where the businessman had grabbed her. "Ms. Mitchell, may I see your tattoo?" Sarah hesitated, then slowly extended her left arm. Harrison gently took her hand, positioning her forearm, so he could read the names clearly, though he already knew every one of them by heart. The restaurant was completely silent now. 60 people held their breath, watching this strange confrontation unfold. Harrison read each name aloud, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Marcus Chun, David Rawlings, Tyler Brooks, Anthony DeLuca, James Nakamura, Robert McDonald. He traced his finger just above the coordinates tattooed beneath the names, careful not to actually touch Sarah's skin. 34.5553 degrees north, 69.2075 degrees east. Kabul, Afghanistan, March 15, 2019. He looked up at the four businessmen, and there was something terrifying in his calm expression. I know these coordinates. I know this date. I know these men. He paused, letting his words sink in, because I was their commanding officer. The color drained from the leader's face. Harrison continued, his voice taking on the formal tone of someone delivering a military briefing. On March 15, 2019, at approximately 1,430 hours local time, SEAL Team 7 responded to reports of a building collapse in Kabul. A structural failure had trapped approximately 30 civilians in a 3-story residential building. My team was the closest quick response force available. He gestured to Sarah, without looking away from the businessmen. This young woman was one of those civilians. She was 19 years old, volunteering with a humanitarian organization that provided education to Afghan children. When the building came down, she was on the 2nd floor teaching an English class. Sarah's eyes closed, the memory clearly painful even after all this time. My team spent 7 hours extracting civilians from that collapse. Harrison continued. The building was unstable. We had reports of possible Taliban fighters in the area, waiting to ambush rescue operations. But we went in anyway because that's what SEALs do. We save lives. He paused, his jaw tightening. 6 of my men died in that building, not from enemy fire, from secondary collapses while they were carrying civilians to safety. Marcus Chin was carrying a 6-year-old girl when the 3rd floor came down on him. David Rawlings and Tyler Brooks were supporting a load-bearing beam to create an escape route when the structure shifted. Anthony DeLuca, James Nakamura, and Robert McDonald were in the deepest part of the collapse, where Ms. Mitchell and 12 other civilians were trapped. The entire restaurant was listening now, some people openly crying. Those 3 men found Ms. Mitchell and the others. They created a safe path through unstable rubble. They transferred the civilians up through 3 levels of collapsed building, 1 person at a time. Mac, Robert McDonald, was the last one out. He was helping Ms. Mitchell climb through the final gap when a concrete slab shifted. He pushed her through to safety. The slab fell and crushed her before he could follow. Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she relived that day. Harrison finally looked at her, and his expression softened. The last thing Max said, according to the SEAL who caught you on the other side, was, "Tell her this isn't her fault. Tell her to do something beautiful with the life we saved." He turned back to 4 businessmen, who looked like they wanted to disappear through the floor. So when you gentlemen decided to mock Ms. Mitchell's tattoo, when you laughed at her memorial to the men who died saving her life, when you suggested she was faking patriotism or seeking attention, you weren't just being cruel to a waitress. You were disrespecting 6 Navy SEALs who made the ultimate sacrifice. The leader tried to speak, his voice cracking. We didn't know. We couldn't have known. Harrison's eyes went cold again. No, you couldn't have known, because you didn't ask. You saw something you didn't understand, and instead of showing basic human decency, you chose mockery. You chose cruelty. You chose to humiliate someone who has survived more in her 22 years than you'll experience in your entire comfortable, privileged lives. He stepped back, addressing the entire restaurant now. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption this evening. Drinks are on the house for everyone. But before these 4 guests leave, and they are leaving, I want you all to understand something. Harrison moved to stand beside Sarah, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. This young woman is not a fake patriot. She's not seeking attention. She carries the names of my fallen teammates on her skin because they gave their lives to save hers. She volunteers every Sunday at the VA hospital. She donates half her tips to a scholarship fund for children of fallen special operations personnel. She lives quietly, without fanfare, honoring the sacrifice that was made for her. He turned to face Sarah directly, and to everyone's surprise, this quiet restaurant owner, this former chef who never talked about his past, came to attention and rendered a crisp, formal military salute. Ms. Mitchell, on behalf of the United States Navy SEALs, and on behalf of the men whose names you carry, I salute your courage, your grace, and your commitment to honoring their memory. Sarah's hand instinctively rose to return the salute, a gesture that Harrison had clearly taught her at some point. The movement was precise, military perfect, practiced. The restaurant erupted in applause. People stood from their tables, clapping and cheering. The elderly man who had looked uncomfortable earlier approached with tears in his eyes. He was wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap that Sarah hadn't noticed before. "Ma'am," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "thank you for keeping their memory alive." The aftermath of four businessmen left their table in silence. Their earlier arrogance completely evaporated. As they passed the front desk to settle their bill, the hostess informed them that Commander Harrison had already charged their credit cards for the full price of the restaurant's most expensive meals, $800 per person, plus a 25% automatic gratuity that would go directly to Sarah. "Consider a donation to the families of fallen SEALs," Harrison had told the hostess, "and make sure they're added to our Do Not Serve list permanently." The leader paused at the door, turning back to where Sarah stood surrounded by supportive customers. "Miss Mitchell," he called out, his voice genuinely remorseful now. I'm truly sorry. What we said was inexcusable." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "I hope you remember this the next time you see someone who looks different or carries something you don't understand. Sometimes the people who appear the most ordinary have the most extraordinary stories." After they left, the restaurant slowly returned to normal, though the atmosphere had changed. What had been just another anniversary celebration had become something deeper, a reminder that heroism exists, that sacrifice matters, and that sometimes the people serving your dinner carry weights you can't imagine. Harrison gently guided Sarah back to the kitchen, where his sous chef had already poured her a glass of water. She sat on a stool, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I should have kept my sleeves down. I shouldn't have let them see." "Stop," Harrison interrupted firmly but kindly. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You have every right to wear that tattoo with pride. I don't like the attention. I don't want people to think I'm using their sacrifice to make myself look heroic or, Sarah." Harrison pulled up another stool and sat across from her. "Look at me." She met his eyes, and she saw something that she'd never noticed before, a deep, shared understanding of loss. "I carried guilt for years," Harrison said quietly. "Guilt for surviving missions that killed men under my command. Guilt for every decision that seemed right at the time but cost lives. Guilt for coming home when they didn't. Do you know what finally helped?" Sarah shook her head, understanding that the best way to honor the fallen isn't to hide in shame or minimize their sacrifice. It's to live well, to live fully, to be the reason their sacrifice mattered. He gestured to her tattoo. "You carry their names on your skin. But more importantly, you carry their legacy in your actions. Mac told you to do something beautiful with the life he saved. That's exactly what you're doing." Fresh tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks, but these felt different, cathartic, releasing years of held-back emotion. Did you know them well?" she asked. "The 6 men." Harrison smiled, and it was the saddest, most genuine smile Sarah had ever seen. "I knew them like brothers. Mac was the first SEAL I ever trained as a new commander. Chun could make anyone laugh, even in the worst situations. Hawk, David Rawlings, was supposed to retire that year. He had a daughter who just graduated college. Brooks and Nakamura were inseparable, best friends since BUD/S training. And DeLuca, he was planning to propose to his girlfriend the week after that mission." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm so sorry they died because of me." "No," Harrison said firmly, gripping her shoulders gently. "They didn't die because of you. They died doing what they trained their entire careers to do, saving innocent lives. That building collapsed because of structural failure and wartime instability, not because of anything you did. And those men, every single one of them, made the conscious choice to go into that collapse knowing the risks. They were heroes before they died. You're not the reason they died. You're the reason their deaths meant something. The words broke something open in Sarah that had been closed for 3 years. She cried into Harrison's shoulder, and the tough former SEAL commander held her like a father, letting her release the survivor's guilt she'd been carrying in silence. The ripple effect of the story of what happened at Marino's Steakhouse spread quickly. Within 24 hours, local news had picked it up. Within 48 hours, it had gone national. Veterans organizations shared it on social media. The Navy SEAL Foundation reached out to both Harrison and Sarah, but perhaps the most meaningful impact was local and immediate. The 4 businessmen, whose names were never publicly released, though their company quietly reassigned them to different positions. Each made substantial anonymous donations to military charities. One of them, the leader, reached out through a lawyer to offer a personal apology and asked if there was any way he could make amends. Harrison's response, delivered to his own attorney, was simple. Honor them by learning from this. Treat people with dignity. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. And remember that everyone you meet is carrying something you can't see. The restaurant itself became something of a memorial site. Harrison created a small wall near the entrance. Nothing flashy, just a simple wooden plaque with 6 names, 6 dates, and the phrase, "These men save lives." Beneath it was a quote, "The brave die never, though they sleep in dust. Their courage nerves 1,000 living men." Sarah continued working at Marino's, but with a change. She stopped hiding her tattoo. She wore short sleeves, and when people asked about the names on her arm, which happened often, she told them the truth, not seeking attention or sympathy, but honoring the memory of the men who gave their lives for strangers. And slowly, painfully, she began to forgive herself for surviving. The message to remember the story of Sarah Mitchell and Commander James Harrison isn't just about a tattoo or a confrontation in a restaurant. It's about the invisible weight that people carry. It's about the danger of assumptions. It's about the difference between judgment and curiosity, between cruelty and kindness. Every day, we encounter people whose stories we don't know. The quiet person in the corner might be dealing with grief. The person with scars or tattoos might be carrying memories of sacrifice. The one who seems withdrawn might be fighting battles we can't see. Sarah's tattoo wasn't a fashion statement or a political gesture. It was a memorial, a promise, a way of ensuring that 6 heroes would never be forgotten. And when 4 strangers chose to mock what they didn't understand, they learned a lesson that changed them forever. Commander Harrison, who had spent years trying to leave his military past behind, realized that some stories need to be told. Some sacrifices need to be honored publicly. Some heroes, both the ones who died and the ones who survived, deserve recognition. Before you go, we want to hear from you. Have you ever judged someone based on their appearance, only to learn you were completely wrong? Have you carried guilt for something that wasn't your fault? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who needs to hear it. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you to look deeper before judging, hit that subscribe button. Because everyone has a story. Everyone deserves dignity. And sometimes, the most extraordinary heroes look like ordinary people serving your dinner. The names on Sarah Mitchell's arm represent more than 6 fallen SEALs. They represent sacrifice, courage, and the price of freedom. They represent the civilians saved that day, including Sarah herself, who went on to live meaningful lives because brave men chose duty over safety. And they represent a simple truth that every one of us should remember. Before you laugh at someone's tattoo, before you mock their choices, before you judge their appearance, ask yourself if you have any idea what they survived to be standing there at all. Sometimes, the person you're about to ridicule is carrying the names of heroes on their skin and the weight of their sacrifice in their heart. And sometimes, the quiet person in the kitchen who never talks about their past is a decorated military commander who knows exactly what those names mean. Treat people with dignity. Ask questions with genuine curiosity. Show respect for what you don't understand. Because you never know when the story behind someone's tattoo might be the story of fallen heroes, impossible sacrifice, and a young woman who survived because 6 Navy SEALs decided her life was worth giving their own. This story is dedicated to all the quiet survivors, all the fallen heroes, and all the veterans who carry memories they can never fully share. You are not forgotten. You are honored, and your sacrifice matters more than words can ever express.